Hi, how you doing? I know I've been very inactive with my channel these days, but my university is making things harder than usual and I have to take care of my health first. I hope you are having a great holiday and hopefully you get to achieve whatever goals you have for the next year. We are near the end of 2022 and I feel like time has passed quicker than I thought. 2022 was something, I guess. Bad things happen as usual, but for me, I've played a lot of games this year, whether they are old or new releases. So today I'm going to be ranking all the video games that I played and finished for the first time this year. Before we get into the list, I just need to let you know that this list is going to contain a lot of video games that came out years ago, and I finished them for the first time just this year. The reason for this is that I only played 3 new games that came out in 2022, and if I made a video discussing only these 3 games, then it would have been too short. Also, I didn't play God of War Ragnarok yet. What? So don't expect it to be on my list. I apologize for that. Without further ado, let's get into the list. Number 14, Layers of Fear. I feel like the first-person hide-and-seek horror genre has overstayed its welcome these days. It was good when it was trending in the early 2010s with releases like Amnesia: The Dark Descent, Outlast, Slender, and Five Nights at Freddy's. But right now, the industry is going back to the roots of survival horror, which is how the horror genre was introduced to gaming in the first place. Thanks to Alone in the Dark, Resident Evil, and Silent Hill. There's just nothing more you can do in video games where all you have to do is get from point A to point B, solve some riddles, and just hide from your opponents to avoid dying. This is exactly why I consider Layers of Fear to be the worst game I've played this year. I do not understand the positive reception for this game. This is what the Blubber Team studio is mainly known for, and their next project is the remake of Silent Hill 2. Layers of Fear is just a PT clone that brings absolutely nothing new to the table. This is the definition of a walking simulator. It's filled with lame jump scares, the performance is poorly optimized, and the story is just not interesting at all. The worst thing about it is that there's no challenge whatsoever in this entire game. You have no opponents to avoid and you can die anywhere in any levels of this game. This felt less like a video game than a Telltale game, I'm not joking at all. The only good things I can say about it is that it has great level transitions and the puzzles were decent. Other than that, I did not enjoy this game at all, and this is why I will remain skeptical about Blubber's next project. I really hope they can prove me wrong though. Number 13, The Evil Within. I am so disappointed to have this game so low on this list, considering that I am a huge fan of the Resident Evil franchise. I love pretty much all the main titles of the franchise. Yes, even the low ones for different reasons. The Evil Within was created by the RE creator himself, Shinji Mikami, and it was the very first survival horror game he has directed since Resident Evil 4. He was tired of how the industry was pushing the horror genre to be heavily inspired by Amnesia and cut the combat mechanics in order to make them scary. So he founded a studio called Tango Gameworks with the help of Bethesda to publish the projects, and his first project was a horror game called The Evil Within. It was marketed to bring back the basics of survival horror back to the mainstream market, and the game finally got released in 2014. Did they manage to reach their goals in the end? This game, unfortunately for me, did not live up to its marketing. The Evil Within suffers from an identity crisis, unpolished gameplay, overlength chapters, and characters with almost no personality. The gameplay is so poorly programmed, my guns happen to have such an inaccurate shot at times, and most of the enemies are bullet sponges. The Evil Within has such a weird way of changing the pace. First I'm in a village exploring houses for supplies and avoiding enemies. Now I am in ancient areas during daylight with some action elements. Then I go through a mansion where you peacefully get through different rooms for puzzle solving with a guy trying to slay me wherever he wants to. And now I am in a destructed city with instant kill water monster that I have to avoid and overpacked action sequences. Just what the hell? I don't understand why it takes like 25 hours to finish this game. There are so many chapters and parts of the game that don't serve any purpose other than padding the game. Linear games should not be over 15 hours long because it kills the replay value. Well, it kinda depends on the pacing, but the Evil Within does have an over pacing overall. Last but not least, the characters are so lifeless. They barely share backstories, they barely react like normal human beings, and they have no personality whatsoever. I didn't care about any of them, well maybe except for Ruby because the game revolved around his backstory for the plot. I did not play any of the DLCs yet and I heard they were good or better than the base game, but I can't say anything about them. Overall, The Evil Within has so many great ideas that I think were poorly executed and it annoyed the hell out of me. I don't understand how this game is more unpolished and unbalanced than a game from 2005. So yeah, this game just didn't do it for me. Number 12. Never-ending Nightmares. This year, I was willing to experience as many horror games as possible just for pleasure, but then I figured that I shouldn't expect much from small indie games despite their popularity. Never-ending Nightmares is an indie side-scrolling black and white horror game inspired by the developer's battle with mental illness in real life. The story follows a man named Thomas who seems to be dreaming all over the place. He never wakes up in real life and he has to go through different places to find some answers and escape from his nightmares. I don't think there's much to say about this game. All you do is go through hallways so many times, you avoid some danger, and the story just stays vague for the rest of the game. The purpose of this game is to just share what the developer himself was going through in his life. This game was just fine. It's kinda repetitive, the gameplay doesn't have much to offer, but I guess it does enough to achieve the creator's goal. Number 11. Among the Sleep. Same as Never-ending Nightmares, I don't have much to say about this game. Among the Sleep is an amnesia type game where you play as a baby, you have a teddy bear as a companion, you solve a few riddles and you have to avoid a creepy opponent in order to reach the B objective. This game was also just fine. I have fun with it, but I'll never play it ever again. Number 10. The Evil Within 2. After being so disappointed with the first Evil Within, I didn't have much expectations going through this game. But good news is that this game was actually pretty decent. I actually had fun with this game way more than the first game. Unfortunately, it doesn't really say much because it's filled with some of the same flaws and some that are different. One thing that I think Tango Game didn't improve was the gunplay. It felt inconsistent and my guns weren't very accurate when shooting the zombies. It's just a little bit better than the first game. Another thing is that the devs fixed a lot of things that I don't think anyone ever complained about the first game. Why is the atmosphere toned down? I actually like the tone of the first game. Why are the first levels of this game put in an open world setting? I never complained about the first game being linear, the game itself was just too long in my opinion. And why the fuck did they add this Fallout 4 dialogue system in which you have two characters talking, each of them has only one camera shot put on their face, and they move their bodies like they're some kind of Skyrim NPCs? Nobody asked for this in a linear single player game, no one did. My apologies for screaming, but I couldn't stand this game design choice. As much as I'm glad that the characters feel more natural and the story is more straightforward this time, I feel like they overdid those aspects in some parts. There are so many instances in which Sebastian doesn't act like he's the same guy from the first game. He's wondering so many times how this entire Matrix virtual machine is working, despite already experiencing this type of event in the first game.
Is this... Where am I? What the hell is this place? What the... Alright. What the fuck is going on here?
Also, the story of The Evil Within is just nothing special. It's cliched, an obvious rip-off of the plot from the first Silent Hill game, and the game just didn't do anything new with this inspiration. I don't understand why the game focuses entirely on Sebastian's family rather than the cliffhanger that was left in the first game. Overall, this game was just fine. It wasn't as annoying as the first game, I did have fun with it, but I didn't care much for it in the end. Number 9. Tormented Souls. No, this is not a typical Souls game that we are all familiar with. This is an indie horror game that pays homage to the classic survival horror games like Resident Evil and Silent Hill, and it stays true to its purpose. Fixed camera angles? Check. Puzzles that are very challenging? Check. Environment interaction? Check. Limited ammo management? Check. Manual save time? Checkmate. This game has a great atmosphere and the enemies were pretty unique and terrifying. For a project like this made by a very small team is very impressive. However, in general speaking, this game isn't perfect because 90% of the game is just solving riddles. The enemy variety is kinda lacking, the cast of characters is very minimal with only 3 people present in the game, and it has no boss fights until you reach the end of the game. I did enjoy this game, but I don't feel like revisiting it anytime soon. Number 8. Firewatch. It was kinda unfortunate for me to spoil myself with the ending of this game back in 2016. I couldn't afford this game in any of the platforms that I had back in the day, and instead, I watched other YouTubers play it. Firewatch is an indie game created by Campo Center which was founded by the creators of Telltale's Walking Dead, Sean Verman and Jake Rodkin, and the story follows a man named Henry who tries to get away from his life problems by taking the job of a fire lookout in the woods. He meets up with his supervisor Delilah through a walkie-talkie, and you spend the entire game experiencing the relationship between those characters with just dialogue. This is one of the most relaxing games I've ever played. It delivers a very interesting plot and backstories, and the voice acting was just breathtaking. Most people were kinda disappointed with this game due to the ending itself, and I can see why, but for me, it didn't bother me at all. My expectation was to just have a relaxing experience, and the goal was achieved. The best way I can describe this game is that it's one of the best one-time experiences I've ever had in gaming. I enjoyed this game a lot, I played it on Game Pass, but I do not feel like playing it ever again. Number 7. Stray. You guys were waiting for a 2020 release, am I right? Well, here it is. Stray is an indie game developed by Blue 12 Studio, and surprisingly, it won a lot of nominations than anyone ever expected. In this game, you play as a cat who gets separated from his family. He falls into a locked down city underground. It meets up with this little robot who guides it through its journey, and you explore those cyberpunk-esque places populated by robots who are trying to act like human beings. You also approach those little creatures called Zergs that serve as your opponents in the first half of the game, and they act exactly the same as the headcrabs from Half-Life. You sure don't want to see a cat being devoured by those. This game was a lot of fun, not because I was playing as a cat, but I loved the world building, it had great pacing, and it was very emotional. I kinda wish it wasn't very short. Now I am someone who is fine with games taking small hours to complete, but it didn't feel like Stray delivered enough levels and lore for us to enjoy. There are just so many ideas that the developers could explore with it. I played this game through PS Plus Premium trial and I didn't pay any money for it. I completed in Platinum Stray in under 1 week. I kinda feel bad for not giving the developers any profit because they did put a lot of effort in this project, but I guess they'll get the money from Sony. I love this game a lot, but there is one thing I have to admit. Fuck the Can't Catch Me trophy. Fuck this trophy in particular. Number 6. Control. I am completely new with the Remedy studio, so take this small review as a perspective of a new Remedy player. I played the first Max Payne game a few years ago, but I never finished it. And my first Remedy game that I completed is Alan Wake Remastered in 2021. Unfortunately, I didn't really like that game as much as everyone else did. I thought it was extremely repetitive and the story didn't really click with me. You spend most of the game just flashing enemies and shooting them until they die. That's pretty much what this game is offering, and most of the game takes place in the forest areas. I might get flack for this, but here we go. The next Remedy game that I finished is Control, and I pretty much bought this game only for the concept alone. You play as a woman who has telekinetic powers, and she came to this building to take over a business or whatever the plot of this game was. I love this game much better than Alan Wake. This may be a huge hot take, but why should I tell lies about my opinions? Control delivered exactly what I expected. A fun gameplay and combat with the use of telekinesis. It brought me back to my days of playing Infamous 2. This game was also very challenging, surprisingly. In some areas I felt so underpowered, and there are also some parts that I thought were cheap shots. I didn't care much for the story or Control, so the gameplay was enough for me to enjoy it. I really wish this game had a new Game Plus mode. Like, what the hell? A game that features an upgrade system should never not have a new Game Plus mode. I don't think there are any excuses for this design choice. Big missed opportunity. Other than that, Control was a great game, and the PS5 version made it better. Number 5.
Resident Evil.
As mentioned before, I'm a huge fan of the Resident Evil franchise. I pretty much played all the main titles in the series, well except for one, which is the game that started it all. Resident Evil Director's Cut was a huge surprise for me, because I enjoyed it a lot more than I expected, considering that the very first Resident Evil game that I played and finished was the HD remaster of the 2002 remake. I thought the original Resident Evil was going to be very dated compared to the future titles. Not just in terms of graphics, but also the gameplay itself. I tried to play this game on PS3, but that version did not support analog sticks. I had to rely on arrow keys on the controller to move a character, and that made me rage quit completely. I mean, I did play the original Resident Evil 2 and 3 on the same console, and those do have analog stick support, only the first game did not. It may be kind of an exaggeration, but I refuse to play a game in which I control a character with arrows on the controller. Anyways, the original Resident Evil was such a blast to play through, just like the other main titles, and I can see why it revolutionized the survival horror genre in 1996. The game is surprisingly much more different compared to the remake than I thought. There are no Crimson Heads, there's no Lisa Trevor, there's no 4-death mask puzzle, you cannot save Richard from his bite wound at all, and there's a different butterfly effect when it comes to the fate of Barry and Rebecca. I love this game a lot and I can't thank Sony enough to let me play this game for free on PS5 when I already had it on PS3. It also helps that they updated the controls with analog sticks. Now I am officially a fan of the Resident Evil franchise and I cannot wait for the Resident Evil 4 remake next year. Number 4. Silent Hill 4 The Room. I have recently begun getting into the Silent Hill franchise, starting with the original Silent Hill in 2020. I played the first game on the PS3 console, and then I played Silent Hill 2 and 3 on PC in 2021. Just like Resident Evil, I had so much fun with those games. Silent Hill 2 is considered the best game of the franchise, and I can see why. But I think Silent Hill 3 is my favorite because I love Heather's characters, and it had the best gameplay and atmosphere out of the original trilogy in my opinion. For Halloween this year, I decided to finish my Silent Hill marathon by playing the very last Japanese entry, Silent Hill 4 The Room.
Oh, hi, Mark.
Fuck off, Tommy! Silent Hill 4 is considered to be the most polarizing entry out of all the games developed by Team Silent, and I can see why, but at the same time, I don't think it deserves the hate. The story follows a guy named Henry who is trapped in his apartment. He's locked completely with those chains on the door, he can't get help from anyone outside, and he has to go through different places by crawling through this mysterious hole in his apartment. His home serves as a help area for the player to save their progress and manage their supplies with this item box. Resident Evil much? Unlike the previous entries, the game has only 2 guns in this entire campaign, and you will rather rely more on the melee weapons to defeat your enemies. What is really interesting is that the Silent Hill town itself does not make any appearance whatsoever in this game. I mean, there are no levels in which you wander around the streets of Silent Hill. You only have 6 different places to go through. The biggest props I have for this game are the villain itself, Walter Sullivan, and this one type enemy, the Twin Victim. This opponent is completely unique and terrifying. Look at it just standing and pointing at me. This is nightmare fuel. I think it's the best Silent Hill enemy design of all time, hands down. While this game has noticeable missteps, I still had a lot of fun with this game, almost as much as the original trilogy. I still felt like I was playing a Silent Hill game despite the change of direction. This is a very passable entry. It's not flawless, but it's still good. I wish this game got a remake instead of Silent Hill 2. Number 3. A Plague Tale Innocence. Now I've made an in-depth review for this game, link will be in the description down below. But to keep it short, this game is the biggest surprise I've had this year. A Plague Tale Innocence was not on my radar at all until I finally decided to give it a shot in the last spring. I played this game when I decided to trade my old PS4 with an Xbox One X after finally getting a PS5. I downloaded this game through Game Pass, I finished it, and I was blown away. I love this game so much that I decided to buy the game myself on PS5. I did not wait for a price drop or anything, I bought it directly from the PSN store, and it was worth it because it had a PS5 upgrade. That's how much I was obsessed with this gem. A Plague Tale Innocence is a story-driven action game in which you play as this French girl Amicia who has the responsibility of protecting her own brother from an army called the Inquisition and has to do whatever it takes to prevent her brother from dying of a mysterious deadly disease called the Macula. It has been a long time for me to play a game that managed to impress me so much with its story and characters. While the gameplay is very minimal with its mechanics and some parts felt kind of unbalanced, I forgive this game with its incredible storyline delivered. I was so shocked to hear that this game was made by a team of only 40 people, despite having a AAA look to it. I think you guys already know what's gonna come next. Number 2. Elden Ring. What is there to say that hasn't been said already? Elden Ring deserved to win the Game of the Year award.
You know, real quick, I want to thank everybody and say that...
Fuck you, Clinton fanboy! I started getting into the Souls games ever since I got Bloodborne on Christmas 2017, which is the best gift I've ever received in my life. Without a single question, Elden Ring was my most anticipated game of 2022, and it did not disappoint. I was actually surprised to see how it was critically appraised. I mean, this is the very first video game that isn't made by Rockstar, Sony or Nintendo to earn such a huge reception. But I can't say it didn't deserve it because From Software is by far, in my opinion, the only gaming studio who has remained consistent for more than a decade without releasing anything bad. I mean, even Dark Souls 2 wasn't even a bad game despite being the weakest entry of the Souls franchise. Elden Ring is more than just Dark Souls but in an open world setting. It's a combination of everything that made the Soulsborne franchise so good. And unlike any typical open world games, it doesn't force you to follow its narrative or beat any bosses in a particular order. You have so many areas you can access through without having to do a puzzle or beat any bosses, and he has different builds which helps the game increase its replay value and give you a different experience. It also helps that the lore of this game was done with the help of the Game of Thrones writer George R.R. Martin. While Bloodborne remains to be my personal favorite From Software game, Elden Ring definitely earned its spot on my top 3 best Souls game, along with Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. Number 1. The Callisto Protocol. This is one of the horror games I've ever played in my life. It had everything I wanted to see in a survival horror experience. It had characters, gameplay, graphics, sound design, and voice acting. Just kidding, of course. I didn't even play this game, I'll buy it when the price drops, because I refuse to support $70 games that lack so much content. I'm sorry Glenn, but you should have known better. Number 1. A Plague Tale Requiem. This is my personal game of the year of 2022. This game was also not on my radar until I played the first game and was my most anticipated game for the rest of the year. And no surprise, this game lived up to my hype. But it did more than just that. It also managed to surpass the original game, which I already loved. It fixed all the issues I have with the first game, and it expanded upon the characters that I care so much for in that game. A Plague Tale Requiem continues the story of Amicia and Hugo just 6 months after the events of the first game. Their new objective is to find a cure that helps Hugo get rid of the macular disease once and for all, and the rats have become a much bigger threat than before. As said before, this game did everything I wanted to see in a sequel. The expanded relationship between Amicia and Hugo, improved gameplay, more world building, a bigger emotional impact, and a new Game Plus edition. It has been a long time for me to have an anticipated title that affected me so much in a good way. A Plague Tale Requiem brought me back to my old days of playing Uncharted 2 Among Thieves countless times, and the story just broke me in a good way. The character performances were phenomenal, especially Charlotte McBurney. She killed it as Amicia the Rule, who has now become one of my favorite video game characters of all time, and I wish she could get more recognition for her work. This game did exactly what The Last of Us Part 2 failed to do for me. It had a compelling storyline, all the main characters served their own purposes, it was well paced, and the gameplay did not overstay its welcome. The developers did not play any favors, and the risks that they took were completely earned. I do not think it's an exaggeration when I say that Amicia and Hugo have the best sibling chemistry ever delivered in a video game, and therefore, A Plague Tale Requiem is my number 1 game of 2022. So there you have it. What do you guys think of my backlog of this year? Did your favorite game end up on this ranking? If not, let me down below what your favorite games of 2022 were. I think this year was pretty good for game releases, and I cannot wait to see what 2023 is going to deliver because we have a lot of anticipated titles coming up. Hopefully most of them will end up good. I will do my best to try and stay active on this channel, but do not get your expectations high. Thank you guys so much for watching, hopefully you had a great year, and I'll see you all in 2023. See ya.